Okay, every day we welcome David back. Every day is new opportunity, always new things to learn. Anytime. Okay, yesterday we got into a new subject. The subject was that there was 18, because they wrote 18 decrees, 18 laws were enacted by the rabbis when they went to the attic of Hananiah ben Goron, Hananiah ben Cheskia. They went up to his attic. This rabbi was, so to speak, like secluded himself in the attic for a certain project. What is it called? You can put on your coat. I don't want you to catch a cold, David. You know what I mean? Or maybe sit in a different area. Because I don't know wherever it's blowing from, right? And the rabbi, and they made 18, they wrote 18 laws over there. He secluded himself because he was focusing on a project regarding the Sefer Yecheskel, where there were certain things in the Yecheskel that on surface seemed to go indicate contradictory to the words of the Torah itself. And therefore, he needed to explain how it's not a contradiction. For instance, here you have your Kohen. Let's say it said in Yecheskel, a Kohen cannot eat a nevela. Kohen can't eat a dead animal that wasn't slaughtered. So why does it only say a Kohen can't eat a nevela? Nobody, no Yisrael, whether you're Kohen or Levi, Yisrael can eat a nevela, an animal that wasn't slaughtered. So why do you need to? Why does it mention the Kohen can't eat the nevela? It seemed to indicate on surface only the Kohen, and everybody else could eat a nevela, and that now it can't be because the Torah says nobody can eat a nevela. So Yecheskel is definitely not going against the Torah. But the people, if they would learn Yecheskel, I mean, the words of Yecheskel are emet, but people can make mistakes. If you can't explain it, people will make a mistake. And therefore, he was able to explain why it mentions Kohen specifically. And, similar ideas. And therefore, because of him, we have the Sefer Yecheskel today. If he would not have focused, taken on the project of explaining Sefer Yecheskel, they would have hit Sefer Yecheskel, David. They would have hit it. We're now on 13b. We're on 13b4. We're up to the right column, number 3 in the list. That's where we got up to yesterday. Okay? So they made these enactments that we're focusing now on a certain amount of the 18. And these that we're focusing on now are items, but they all have in common now, meaning he was the one, David, behind the enactment that you can't read on Shabbat at the light of an oil lantern. Because we're concerned if you're going to read at the light of the oil lantern, remember we learned about that? You might come to move the lantern. Because you might want to, let's say if the light is dim, you might come to, are you cold now or better? If let's say if I'm reading on Friday night at the light of an oil lantern, and if the light is not so strong, I might forget and move the lantern so the oil should come closer to the wick to make the fire. And if the oil comes closer to the wick, it'll burn brighter. But the problem with that on Shabbat, that's called making a fire on Shabbat. So therefore, he was behind the enactment that you can't do that on Shabbat. You can't read at a oil lantern on Shabbat. So what the Gemara yesterday was trying to identify the 18 items that they made a decree about, and many of them dealt with issues regarding David Cohen, regarding Tumah, regarding Truma, items that would invalidate, which is very, very, very especially important to the Kohen. Nobody could contaminate Truma but the Kohen is the one who's dealing much more with Truma than anybody else. And these items that we're listing will have the items or people or situations or things will contaminate, or I don't want to use the word contaminate, will invalidate Truma. If one comes in contact with Truma, if this item or person or a thing or food or liquid comes in contact with Truma, we'll see it will invalidate the Truma, that the Kohen will not be able to eat the Truma because it came in contact with this type of thing. So let's look at number 3. Number 3 is Hashoteh Mashkin Tmeim. Got it, David? If someone drinks liquid that became tamei. Now, liquid that becomes tamei, what would be? Let's say you have water, right? There are 7 liquids that have the ability to receive contamination. Let's say honey from dates, oil, milk, blood, dew, wine, right? These are the 7 things that there are opinions. The Ravid holds that all fruit juices could receive contamination. Now, so if you have something, if you have a liquid that was contaminated, right? So let's say you have a liquid that was contaminated, and a liquid, let's say a person came in contact with a dead animal, right? So if a person comes in contact with a dead animal, a dead cow that was not slaughtered, an avela. So if you come in contact with an avela, it makes you tamei, right? You have to go to the mikveh if you come in contact with that animal. But if that animal, if let's say a liquid came in contact with that dead animal, so that liquid is tamei. Now, that liquid does not have the power to contaminate a person. If a person touches a liquid, is let's say it's a rishon l'tumah. The liquid came in contact with the dead animal. Right. The dead animal is, let's say, the dad. He's the source of the contamination. He wasn't slaughtered. The liquid that came in contact with that animal is a rishon, is the child, so to speak, is the offshoot of the dead animal. Now, a liquid does not have the power to contaminate a person. A liquid doesn't have the power to contaminate a utensil. To contaminate a person or a utensil, you have to be a source of tumah. You have to be the actual tumah itself. Now there is an exception. I mean, there's the spit of a zav. There is, there's certain, we'll see that the spit of a zav is a man who has unusual discharge. His spit would contaminate. But general liquids, let's say water, these type of liquids, like we just mentioned, do not have the ability, even though they become contaminated, they don't have the ability to contaminate a person, to transfer to a person. They could transfer to another liquid, to another food, but they can't, to make a person contaminated, you have to be a higher level to make a person contaminated. Now, nevertheless, with that being said, if a person drinks this liquid, if you drink this liquid, let's say this water that became contaminated, you drank it, now you who drank that liquid, if you would come in contact with truma, you now will invalidate the truma. You would make it, so to speak, like contaminated. You would ruin the truma once you drank this liquid that was contaminated. Now, the Gemara is going to explain what is the reason for this. Obviously, this was a protection. The rabbis made a certain type of protection. We'll see more as the Gemara will explain. Number 4, Habaro shova ruba b'mayim shuvim. If a person, his head and the majority of his body goes into water that was drawn. Now, what does that mean? It means the following. A guy went to the mikveh, and he went to a beautiful mikveh, and he was tovel himself, he dipped himself. And after he went to a kosher mikveh, he dipped in a non-kosher mikveh. What's a non-kosher mikveh? Water that was drawn. For mikveh water to be kosher, if let's say a mikveh is you have a pool. There's different types of mikvahs. You have the natural spring. You have a natural pool of water, of spring water that comes from the ground, or you have a collection of water that you make a hole in the ground, and the rain comes and it collects in the pit. That's a mikveh, correct? They do a lot of archaeological digs near the temple, near the Beit HaMikdash, and they're finding all these stitches, all these mikvehs that they had around there. But the law is that water has to collect naturally. You can't put the water into the pit. You can't draw the water and put it into the pit. It has to collect naturally. Once you have the right size for a mikveh, once you have the 40 sa'ah, the measurement of water for a mikveh, then you could add water into it. But the first 40 sa'ah have to come natural. So they made a decree that if a person went ahead and went to the mikveh, a kosher mikveh, and subsequently went to this type of dip, he put most of his head. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
And we have David Cohen is back and better than ever.
Oh, tell him I said welcome back.
He says welcome back. See that, David? David, you hear that? Better than ever. Not that we're, lower than ever. Better than ever. Okay? Get it? The optimism we have to have, David, right? Now, by the way, you're now in a mikveh, by the way, David. You hear that, Mark? David is in a mikveh. I'm in a mikveh. You're in a mikveh right now. The mikveh of Torah is a mikveh. Torah purifies the person. So you're in a mikveh. I want to tell you that. Okay? Got it? So who says you don't go to the mikveh every day? My father went to the mikveh every day. I don't go to the mikveh every day. But my father never asked me to do that. He took upon himself. He was not a chassid. But this is the closest I get to a mikveh. What can I tell you? So, what did you say, Mark? I can't hear you.
Me too.
You too, right? Okay. So, a guy who goes, Mark, we're talking about an interesting phenomenon. We're going to learn more about it. That in the old days, they would go to the mikveh, and sometimes the mikveh, the water wasn't such a good water. The water was smelly water. And what they did is right after they went to the mikveh, they went to they washed themselves, they poured upon themselves, they dipped in some other pool of water, and that other pool of water was not a kosher mikveh. And the problem was that people started thinking that the real mikveh is not the first mikveh that they went into, which was the real kosher mikveh, but rather the second thing that they went into. And therefore, the rabbi said, if you go to the mikveh and then you go ahead and you go into that thing, you go into that other non-kosher water pool, so to speak, that would make you that. Then, if you would go ahead and subsequently touch truma, you would go ahead and invalidate truma. If you did that, if right after you went to the mikveh, you went into that other non-proper water collection. So they said that you become contaminated as a result of that, and you would invalidate truma until you what do you say?
What do you mean by invalidate? How do you invalidate? You're not making the tumah pure.
No, truma. You invalidate the truma, meaning usually when you go to the mikveh, now you became tahar and you become pure, and then now you would be able to come in contact with truma, right? If a guy goes to the mikveh, guy was tamei today, right? So he was tamei today, so today he can't handle truma, right? You can't touch truma because you're tamei. But then, what? Say it again. Truma is the portion that we separate for the kohen, that we give to the kohen. Your food, your stuff, David. But then when the night came, and went to the mikveh, and the night came, so now he could come in contact with truma. Good morning, Emmanuel. But what about if a person, if we're so to speak, we're gonna invalidate that, if we're gonna say that, you know what, even though you went to the mikveh, but since you subsequently, after you went to a kosher mikveh, you immediately went to a non-kosher mikveh, we're gonna say that you're gonna still be contaminated regarding touching truma. That if you're gonna, after you went to this non-kosher mikveh, right after you went to the kosher mikveh, we're gonna say you still remain contaminated, and you
So
will
then,
now,
so that means the kosher mikveh did nothing for you.
right, at least regarding, right, at least regarding this law. We have to see about other laws, but at least it will make you regard, you still have a status, like we're gonna give you a status like a sheni, like you have the
Right.
ability to,
You could transfer the
right, to truma. But like we're gonna say, you only could go ahead at one level. Only you can invalidate it, ruin it, contaminate it, but it ends there by that truma. The truma can't do anything, cannot make something else, cannot they make other truma invalidated, because that will consider that like a shlishi. We're going to consider that truma as a third. We're going to treat you like a number two, like a second level, and then the truma will become invalidated. That's what I mean when I say the word invalidated. And that's going to, and the Gemara will explain, more details on that law. And therefore, what the guy has to do, he has to now go to a kosher mikvah again, and not follow the dip with a non-kosher mikvah. Now comes the Gemara. Number 5 is
But could he
tahar.
just bathe? Could he go to a bathhouse after kosher mikveh?
Okay,
What is
so
this? What is
right,
this?
right, 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 right. So this, based on this Gemara, at least we'll have to see more in practical and in our times. Based on this Gemara, in those days, you would not be able to go to a bathhouse right after going to the mikveh, because people would make a mistake and think it's the bathhouse that in those days, at least there was the perception that people thought that people started making mistakes, and they were saying, morning Asaf, they were saying it's not the mikveh water that makes you tahar, that purifies you. It's rather the second water that purifies you. And that became a very great concern. And therefore they said, so I would think, in those days, if they would be going to after they would go to this, if they would go to the bath right afterwards, it would be a problem. We have to see more nowadays what the rabbis say. If a person right after they go to the mikveh, if a person's going to go take a shower right after they go to the mikveh, is there a concern? Is there a problem or not? We have to see a little bit more about that. But in those days, there was a problem. There was a concern that people started making, not understanding, realizing that it's the mikveh water that made you pure. This is just the second water is not. But people thought that this water that they would pour on you, but they would pour on themselves. Remember, pouring water, obviously pouring water is not a mikveh. It's not kosher if you pour water on yourself. But people started thinking it's the pouring of the water on themselves that made the person, that was the main thing that made the person pure. And therefore, to deal with the situation that people should not make mistakes, the rabbis made a decree that you cannot go, if you go ahead and you pour on yourself this water, that would invalid, now you would be in a state of contamination to the level that if you come in contact with truma, you would invalidate the truma. Now, number 5 is tahar. David, you got it? Tahar, we're up to number 5, the right column. Tahar shenaflu al rosho v'rubo shlosha lugim mayim shuvin. Here we have someone who did not go to, wasn't contaminated and went to the mikveh, and then subsequently went into the bathhouse, so to speak. Rather, we have somebody that he was pure, he was not contaminated, but it was poured on him, or he poured on himself, on his head, on his most of his body, 3 lugim, certain amount of water mayim shuvim. If it was poured on him, 3 lugim of drawn water, that if he has that, that will now make him contaminated to the point that if he subsequently comes in contact with truma, that will invalidate the truma. We'll have to see. The Gemara will explain what is the concern. The Gemara will explain on the next page. Why did the rabbis say, I understand the guy who went to a kosher mikveh, but the water was very smelly, and then he goes to a then you pour on his body the drawn water. Morning, Jack. I can understand that the concern you just told me, because people will think it's the second water that makes you tahar, not the first water. But what's the issue here? And the guy didn't go to the mikveh. He's just a regular guy who's tahar, who's pure, and now you pour on his head this water, this drawn water. Why should that invalidate? Why should that make him contaminated to the point that if he subsequently comes in contact with truma, he will invalidate the truma? We'll have to. It's a stay tuned moment that the Gemara will explain. But just remember, we've learned before. There's something special about 3 lugim of drawn water. If you recall that when we learned about a mikveh, when you make a mikveh, if in the process of building a mikveh, if 3 lugim, now what's a lug? We say a revi'it. We have a revi'it of wine on Shabbat, meaning that we have the cup holds a revi'it of wine, right? Pesach, we're going to have the cup that will have the 4 cups of wine. Each cup has to hold a revi'it, a minimum revi'it, about 3 ounces, 3.3 ounces. 3 ounces, different shears. Some calculated revi'it. It's 4.5 ounces. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein held for Friday night. We should be more strict, and the cup should hold about 4.42 ounces, about 4.5 ounces. The cup should hold of wine. And for Pesach, he was more lenient. Good morning, Mark. Pesach, he was more lenient, about 3 ounces of wine. The cup should hold, and as you know, the cup of wine that you have Shabbat Friday night is a biblical obligation to say kiddush. The cup is rabbinic, but it's a biblical obligation to say kiddush. He's more strict. But the 4 cups of wine by Pesach is rabbinic law. So he's more lenient. Therefore, it holds Friday night. It should hold 4.5. According to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, I don't think Rabbi Vadi Yosef, Yalkut Yosef, I don't think they make a distinction between Friday night and. I think they're just more lenient just across the board on the size, if I recall correctly, of the cup. You can take a look, maybe it's 3.3. I don't remember, see what he says over there, right? I think that maybe that's what the Yalkut Yosef says. Right, that's a reveal, right? So, but Moshe says, right, Tamei is Tuma, is contaminated, and Posel is to invalidate. Like pasul, it's pasul. Like an esrog, this etrog is pasul. You invalidated it. It's not now. So we were just discussing if you make a mikveh, you have to have. And again, so a revi'it is around. Let's say we'll call it around 3 ounces. So a revi'it of a lug, so it's a quarter of a lug. So a quarter of a lug is a lug is about 12 ounces according to that. 12 ounces, it's not a lot. So 3 lugim is about 36 ounces, right? So it might be a little more, whatever. Another bucket. So now, if you have that amount, 36, more than a liter, so to speak, maybe a liter is like a significant amount. If the mikveh is made, if the original, you need 40 sa of water, it's a much larger amount to be a kosher mikveh. If within the first 40 sa, if you have 3 lugim of water that was not naturally collected, the rain goes right in, you dug a hole and the rain naturally went in, but rather you poured it in, that will make the mikveh not kosher. If you have to make sure the first 40 sa is naturally collected, David. But if you pour in, that's called mayim shuvim, you drew the water and you poured it into the mikveh, that will make, now the mikveh is not, you didn't make a kosher mikveh. Once, the first 40, only the first 40 sa. If you would have 3 lugim, if you have less than 3, it would not invalidate it. But if you have 3 lugim of water before you reach the 40, right? In the original 40, you had 3 lugim drawn, no good. Less than, but if you, well, once you have 40 sa that was done right, then you can add. That's what they do today. They constantly, they can add as much they're adding, that's constantly adding to the water, making the water cleaner, because once they got the 40 and it was done right, many of the mikvos are rainwater that when they built the mikveh, they had the rain, they needed a rain, they dug some, they needed a rain to come in, and therefore today mikveh, many of them. What? Right, but how did it collect originally? They had what I would think that the rain had to come they had to wait for a good rain to collect.
Before they closed off the building?
Right, before they closed off however that's what I would think. You think it?
They don't finish the mikveh and then put on the ceiling and then build a building. The mikveh is not finished. The first thing that's finished is the mikveh.
Right.
That's why you tiled the mikveh and you didn't put the roof and you didn't put the ceiling on the basement. And then you let the rain come straight in the mikveh, and then you put the ceiling, and then you put the first floor, second floor, third floor. No, you don't need to collect it. You just need to collect it once.
Okay, so we have to see how that.
Yeah.
We have to see how today's mikvahs how they're doing it. In the old days, it was very simple. You made a hole outside and the rain collected.
Yeah. In the mikveh, and I have a funnel, and it catches the water on the ceiling. It comes
Right. So those are all right. So those using it again. The question would be if these pipes would be considered a pipe that you're drawing the water to make the right. So these are halachot of mikveh that have to be looked into.
Right.
You know, if that would be right, exactly. That would be, you know, the experts in mikveh. This is what they have to deal with in order to, you know, maybe that's how they're doing it today. They do it in a certain way that it's not technically something that would invalidate the mikveh. That would not be considered that they're drawing the water. You know, because you don't think that they're doing.
When the building is still
Right. Okay, I hear you.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I'll try to ask one of the people who's familiar with how they're making the mikvahs today and see how they're doing it. So now, Vasefer, and the next thing, number 6 on the list, is any of the Svarim, the 24 Sifrei Tanakh. Let's say you have a Sefer Torah or a Sefer Daniel, a Sefer Ezra, Megillat Esther, that if, you know, it's written, and we're talking about it's written on parchment, in the proper writing, and you have if you have if this comes in contact with truma, it would invalidate the truma. It would make the truma invalid. What was the issue? The issue was people used to keep the truma by the sefer, let's say they had you had a Megillat Esther, you had a Sefer Torah. They say the Sefer Torah is holy, the truma is holy. So they would keep it there. What would happen? The mice would come and eat the sefer. So therefore, they said if you're going to put the truma next to the sefer, the truma will be invalidated. So therefore, you're not going to keep the truma near the sefer. That was a reason for that gezerah.
Really validated making a Say, don't put it there.
Right, but yeah, but now that you did it, now you won't be able to eat it anymore. It's gonna become, it's gonna contaminate it, not that it could go to the next level, take something, kind of contaminate something else, but it's gonna ruin it. You won't be able to eat it. So that is the, and then yadayim, hands, that's what we have today. One of the reasons why do we wash our hands today before we go ahead and eat bread? We wash our hands. So the Gemara says, number 7 was based on this enactment that why do we wash our hands? Because in the time of the Mikdash, when we have Truma, we're dealing with Truma like David's time, and if we would touch Truma, if our hands were not washed, and we touch Truma, we will invalidate the Truma. And based on this Gzeirah, because people's hands are always on the move, they're touching all different things, and the rabbis felt, maybe sometimes the hands aren't clean, and it's not respectful for the Truma, if you might make the Truma not appropriate, not nice, or maybe you came in contact with things that went tamei with your hand, and whatever, we'll see. The rabbi said, therefore, we're going to say, you have to wash your hands before you come in contact with Truma. If you don't wash your hands before you come in contact with Truma, then what's going to happen? We're going to say that Truma will become invalidated. So today we don't have Truma, but the rabbis say we got to be in practice. We're looking forward to the Beit HaMikdash to be rebuilt. When the Beit HaMikdash is rebuilt, we need to be used to the Kohan, especially the Kohanim, who are going to be handling the Truma on a regular basis. They have to be used to that their hands are clean, are washed, but they can't touch the Truma without washing their hands. Therefore, because of David Cohen, right. They have to be washed, right? This washing. But now, so in order to keep us in order to make sure that the Kohanim today are going to do this and wash their hands before they eat bread, they made that everybody has to wash their hands. We're all washing our hands really because of David, all the Kohanim, to keep the Kohanim in shape. Right, that's not right. That's not for the same reason. Right, that's not for the same. It's a different reason. Correct. And that's why we wash our hands before we have bread. They said that, they said because we want to make sure that everybody's ready, that the Kohanim are going to be trained to wash their hands before they have Truma. Because if they don't wash their hands, it will invalidate Truma. That is the Gzeirah. They said unwashed hands will invalidate Truma. V'hat Tul Yom. Now, Tul Yom is someone who went to the mikveh, and he didn't go to the mikveh when it was nighttime. He went to the mikveh. Good morning, Gary. He went to the mikveh. Let's say he came in contact with a nevela. He came in contact with a nevela, a dead animal. Well, let's say he himself had relations with his wife, and now he's tamei. And then the next day, he went to the mikveh the next day, but he has to wait till the sun goes down to nighttime for him to become pure. That's called a Tul Yom. That means he went to the mikveh by day, but he has to wait till the night. So the law, if he went at night, then already the sun went down already. But if he went to the mikveh by day, and he has to wait till the nighttime, and really this is a Torah law. The Gemara is going to ask. It's not a rabbinic law. If he would come in contact with Truma before the sun went down, he will invalidate the Truma. So that is number 8 on the list, but the Gemara is going to question this. And the Gemara is going to say that this is not. We're going to remove this from the list because it doesn't belong in the rabbinic. It's not a rabbinic law. It's a Torah law. Okay. Now, remove it from the list of the rabbinic enactments. Meaning, because the Gemara listed it, it's a Torah law. I got to be. It's more so. That's what the Gemara say. You can't call it a rabbinic. You can't say that they enacted it when it was enacted before them. That's what I mean. It's not, it's a rabbinic, it's a Torah law, not a rabbinic law. Because we're listing we're going through the 18 rabbinic laws that were instituted in the attic of Hananiah ben Cheskia when he was there to figure out how to explain Sefer Yecheskel. Because there were certain passages in Yecheskel that on surface contradicted the words of the Torah. Not, I mean, the inference, like we said before, what was one of the cases? The Torah, in Sefer Yecheskel, it says, a Kohen can't eat a nevela. A Kohen can't eat a nevela. What's the implication? That a non-Kohen could eat a dead carcass that was not slaughtered. That's not true. So what does Yecheskel mean? Now, we know the words of Yecheskel are emet, but the average person will learn Yecheskel and make mistakes. So the rabbis were considering, warning Charles, to actually put in a genizah. The rabbis were actually thinking they're going to have to put in a genizah to hide Sefer Yecheskel. People shouldn't make mistakes. But then this rabbi went and he locked himself in the attic. They brought him a lot of oil to keep the lights burning, to keep the lights on, and he figured it out. And he explained what does the pasuk mean. And he explained it doesn't mean Kohen is not allowed to eat nevela, but everyone else can. It's a chidush that even the Kohen can't eat nevela, because we found that the Torah has certainly said it. Torah says, how does a Kohen, good morning, how does a Kohen eat, how does a Kohen process a bird, a little bird, he uses his nail, a chatat ha'of, right? The sin offering, when you bring a bird, the Kohen, you see some kind of keep their nails, that they would, the Torah says you slaughter it, not the normal way you take a knife, and slaughter from the front. Rather, he uses his nail and it comes from the back. The little bird, it's a little bird, doesn't require with a sharp nail, and he cuts through the simanim. He hits it from the back. He hits the main artery, let's say the windpipe or whatever, or the esophagus from the back. But for a regular animal, that would be a nevela. You can't. That's not how you slaughter an animal. But the Torah yet allowed that. Says for the Kohen, that's called a slaughter. For him, that makes it kosher for him to eat the bird as a result of that sin offering. So you might have thought that the Torah has different laws when it comes to nevela regarding a Kohen.
Who could eat that bird?
The Kohen only. It's because remember, Kodesh Kedoshim Achatat, the sin offering is holy, holy. Holy offerings, it can only be eaten by David Cohen. No Yisrael can eat. Yisrael can only eat from lighter holy things, like Korban Pesach and Shlamim and Todah. So, but since the Torah made an allowance regarding the Kohen to eat that animal, not in a way that's called a right. Don't think the Kohen can eat in the Vela. So that's why the Cheskel says even a Kohen can't eat in the Vela. But it doesn't mean but other people can eat. That's just an example of how one of the things, how he was able to explain, somebody says something, he knows what he means, but you might not know what he means unless you explain it. That's really what happened. That's what the Gemara is all about, right, David? A lot of the Gemara is that the Mishnah, the rabbi in the Mishnah liked to speak short. It says Tana Loshe Kalilan Naka. He spoke very short. Everything you remember was by heart. You try to keep it very concise in what you say. And he understood what he meant, and everybody around him understood. But now comes the later generation, we're trying to figure him out. What did he mean? Did he mean that? Did he mean that? What is his intention? That seems to be also the story by Sefer Yecheskel, that the question, what did Yecheskel mean? But then you have the rabbi, that he was such a special, great rabbi, he was able to figure it out. Okay, but we all know it's very important for us today. We have to be very careful to clarify what we mean. People should not make mistakes. All right, right. Exactly. Even the Kohen can't use that procedure. Correct. Have a great day, everybody. You too. Moxie, you're getting into this, the Tumah, the Tara. Asaf, have a great day.